This is Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium.
Today's guest is Dane Elcar. He is an award-winning writer, director, and editor. His work has been screened all over the United States and Europe, including at the Salem Horror Festival, Big Apple Film Festival, Panic Fest, Popcorn Frights, the Hollywood Horror Fest, New Jersey's Horror Con, New Hope Film Festival, the Nassau Film Festival, and others. His feature, BRIGHTWOOD, is his first feature where he received high praise from critics and audiences alike, being called a masterclass in what is achievable with hardly any money whatsoever by The Guardian. He is currently working on a second film. He lives in Princeton, New Jersey with his wife and his daughter. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Well, let me tell you, I could not wait to have you on. When Joey Isabella told me, he said, hey, you got to see this film, Brightwood. And I was like, okay. And then I watched Brightwood, and I was like, is this really happening? I said, I was just like, is this really happening? And I'm like watching it, and I'm like, okay, I think I have figured it out. And then I was just like, wait a minute, I don't think I have it figured out. And I was like, I'm not reading any comments. I'm not going to stop. I have to watch it straight through. And I have to tell you, first of all, like I told Joey, oh my gosh, it's set outside, which is a total attraction for me because I love outside. I also grew up in Yonkers, and we have this park, we still do, called Tibbetts. And it's very similar. And I would jog around the lake. So the minute you guys started jogging, I was like, oh my God, I felt like, this is it. Like I totally engaged with that. So I want to hear your experience because from speaking with Max, I interviewed Max, the actor. He gave me a little bit of background, like the town it was in, that the people of the town weren't used to having a lot of filming done, so they were kind of excited.
Oh yeah, where we filmed in
Yeah,
Rockaway.
so tell me all of that. How did you pick the location? How did you find your actors? How did it all go?
Well, it's a longer story, but the initial, I guess, idea for the film was a short film I did back in 2017 called The Pond. And when my daughter was very young and we were in Westfield, New Jersey, there was a little pond that I would go, or it was like a little nature preserve, and I would go and I'd have her in the jogger, and I'd go jogging around this pond all the time. And as I would do this, I kind of got this, kind of idea of this guy, this kind of vision of being trapped, going around in circles, and how that could potentially be a metaphor for something, but I didn't really, have anything solid. So I ended up kind of just writing a treatment and then getting some friends together, and we did this really simple short film. I'm in it. However, that short film ended up getting into some festivals, and it was basically kind of a condensed experiment to see if the plot would work. Like even just going around in circles, is that possible to film, and would it make sense visually? So it ended up being for a film that was shot on an iPhone, it ended up doing pretty great. And while I was making that film, the short, I kind of had this idea, it suddenly came to me, wow, well, if I had put a couple into this situation, what would that like how would that evolve? What would happen with these people? So that percolated for years, and Max has been my friend and producing partner for a very long time. I've known him for 20 some years, and we've always over the last 10 or so years been working on different projects, and we were in the middle of something that was really coming together, and then COVID hit and that kind of fell apart. So then in my head, I was searching for something that we could do, and this came back, this idea of this couple getting trapped in this loop going around in circles. And yeah, I started writing it and then gave it to Max. He was excited and kind of came on board immediately, and then he introduced me to Dana Berger, the actress in the film, and that led to this kind of amazing experience where three and then a couple other people came on board. We really started just workshopping it on Zoom, where we would read through it and I would kind of change the dialogue and kind of hone the script. At the same time, we started doing the production, which was basically, okay, my initial thought was, oh, well, we can film it in Westfield at this park I used to where I filmed the short, but it was very expensive, and they weren't really welcoming to us to film there. So I literally got on Google Maps and looked at the state of New Jersey and just said, where is any body of water that kind of has a trail around it and kind of is doable? And that's how I found Egbert Lake in Rockaway, New Jersey. I went up the first time I saw it. It was completely covered in snow and someone was fishing on the ice. So, but that ended up being the location. The town of Rockaway was incredibly helpful and open. And as we kind of geared up for production, I would work with the actors and work with my assistant, and yeah, and then we started filming. And I should also say, it's amazing because it was such a wonderful experience to film it and to do it and to see it and have it go to all these festivals. But it's also amazing, Kathy, to have someone like you share it, because it's now been a few years for us, but to have someone share it, to have it still be kind of talked about, the idea that I'm even on here talking about this film, it's really amazing, and I can't thank you enough for doing that and inviting me on.
Oh, no. It's so exciting. I have to say, over the weekend, I was like, oh, I'm going to have Dane on. And then I was just like, let me go to YouTube. And I went to YouTube and I put in your name. And that
Hmm.
short that you're talking about
Yeah,
that you did, you could still see on YouTube. And
yeah,
it's just you, just like you
yeah,
said, like the
yeah,
couple is not there, it's just you. And
yeah,
there's certain things in that. If I had not seen Brightwood, I would
yeah,
think it was a totally different film. So you see a little bit of an overlap, like, I
yeah.
don't want to give it away, but I mean, there's something about
Sure.
ear pods, or like
Yeah.
someone's going to be
It's all
listening to
those little
music.
things.
And yeah, there's
Yeah.
certain things that come up. But also in that, I thought it was really interesting how you did something that wasn't done in Brightwood, was
Hmm.
that you let your character go inside a building and you went into, I think it
Oh, like a
was
wood structure. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
condo, right? Didn't you go into a condo or
Oh,
something?
at the very beginning, it was shot in
Yeah.
my
So
phone.
you
Yeah.
were like inside a condo and you were looking
Yeah.
outside, or you were washing dishes
Yeah.
and you're looking outside. And then you leave, you go outside. But I thought that piece of it, like, I was thinking, wow, this character must think like they're dreaming, or are they hallucinating? Like they see something out the
Oh, you know
window.
what? I think you might actually be talking about another short film I did called Oak. Uh,
Oh, all right.
yeah.
Okay. Because that one to me, where you're
Which
like
is
washing the dishes, it's very similar, right?
It is. There's things about it there. I definitely had something itching in my head. I did that a little before we started doing Brightwood as well. So that the idea of time and being stuck and multiple versions of yourself and what that means, and kind of reflection, and clearly, yes, had something going on. So,
Yeah, so just so the audience knows, the concept of all of these films are very much like there's not a lot of talking. So,
mhm,
like, you're watching more than you're hearing a lot of dialogue. In Brightwood, you see the couple talk or argue, but then there's a lot of long periods when they're not, and you got to
yeah.
like put it together. And that's the piece of it that I liked, because you don't always need to be talked to get the answers or to look for the clues. It really keeps the viewer independent and forces you to kind of like figure it out. Does that
No,
make
that's
sense?
great. Yeah, of course. Well, I always I wanted Dan and Jen, the couple, to just kind of be these, kind of normal fuddy-duddy couple. I didn't want them to be I wanted it to reflect the kind of issues that normal couples would have. They're kind of on the verge of, potentially getting divorced and splitting up. And so then, and in that moment, you suddenly put them into this insane, incredible situation and then allow that to unfold. And, you know, I think that part of the suspense and panic is that, if that were a real situation and these are real people, it was always just treated as, yeah, you wouldn't be talking that much. They would be experiencing it. And then this allows the audience to kind of experience this with this couple going through that absurd situation. where
Well,
they're
I have to
they're-
give you a lot of credit because many years ago, like I don't know, 15 years ago, I was a psychic at the Rock and Roll Club in Poughkeepsie, New York, called The Chance. A lot of people know The
oh,
Chance. It's kind of like
mm,
a known thing. It's closed now. The owner, Frank Palat, and his sister Carolyn had kind of connected with an executive producer by the name of Dan Bucci. And he
mhm.
said, let's just do a reality show. You know, there was a million reality shows.
Yeah, of course.
So they came up with this reality show called Between a Rock and a Hard Place. And the first part of the reality show was what was going on in the club. You know, the band's hitting the
Mhm.
stage, people fighting at the bar, who's ordering drinks, who's trying to come in with a fake ID, you know, like all of
Mhm.
that. And the second part of it was me in the basement. Because as a professional psychic medium, the building was over 100 years old. They
Oh,
had me
wow.
going downstairs and they were recording me, you know? So they
Yeah.
had all of that filmed, and I guess they submitted it, and it won. And we all went down to the Tribeca Film Festival, and
Wow.
we sat there waiting to, you know, to be called the winner. And we lost out to a cooking show. And we were just
Oh,
like, oh my gosh, we were like
yeah,
so in
yeah.
shock. Like, how does that happen? And over the years, I mean, everybody till this day still talk about it. You could see bits of it on YouTube and stuff. But,
Yeah.
you know, Diambucci, you know, who I'm still friends with till this day, he's just like, you know, it's just the business, or it's just, you know, back then when there were so many reality shows, like they couldn't just pick everything up, but
Yeah.
also certain shows weren't guaranteeing that they were going to get picked up. There's
Yeah,
different
of course.
stages of being picked
Yeah.
up. So, you know, it's just, it's kind of like, you know, it's a
Well,
guessing
I mean,
game.
that's not unlike, making a film. You always kind of go forward with the intent that it's going to get made, but there's so many variables of things that can happen that makes it, hurdles that you have to figure out how to, deal with.
Yeah, so it's interesting doing all of these, which I call shorts, and then moving from a short to an actual film. What was the feeling for you doing that?
I'd always loved movies. I'd always loved writing. I'm a writer, I write all the time. And with the intent of making a feature film, that was always kind of the dream. It took me longer than a lot of, I guess, folks, but the short films for me were kind of like an exploration personally to see if I could, really kind of create these minimalist stories. Like when I grew up and growing up, and I'm from California, I'm from Los Angeles. A lot of the friends that I grew up with, like 20 years ago, the whole idea of making a film was, well, you have to have a really great camera, you have to have, amazing production. It has to be millions of dollars to do it. And so I always kind of had this mentality of, oh, well, I got to write a script, I got to sell this script, and it's kind of almost like this impossible thing to kind of figure out what to do. And I spent a good chunk of my 30s, especially after I became a parent, but before, a little bit before, I really kind of threw a lot of that out. And I said, okay, like what can I do with an iPhone? What can I do if I write something with the idea that I'm going to be the only one making it and I'm going to have $15 to do it? What kind of stories can I come up with in those scenarios? And so really those shorts were kind of it was practice, and it was seeing if I could do something that had like a small impact for a viewer. And I took that same kind of strategy and I put it directly into Brightwood, which was essentially, okay, we don't have that much money. We only have one location. It was in the middle of COVID when we were doing it. And what can we do to make a film that is about something, that has a point of view, but also is entertaining and has some genre, elements to it as well. So those short films, gave me the confidence, even if it was just for me and no one else. It gave me the confidence to say, okay, well, I know that I can make this work. Let's translate into this, which is much bigger and grander. And so I mean, they were incredibly important for me as a creative person.
What is your second book going to be more like?
Like
Your
second,
second film, I'm sorry. What is your
oh
second
yeah,
film? Because I think Max said that you guys are working on something
we're
now.
working on a real thriller, a suspense thriller right now. Again, very contained. A lot of it takes place in a car. There are some kind of tech sci-fi elements to it. But again, I'm utilizing kind of what we have to tell a kind of a high-minded story, but from a point of view of what if a person like us was in that kind of situation. And it kind of like the old Hitchcockian like person way over there, you know, in a situation way over their heads. I love that. So that's really been great. And Max and I have been working on it for a few years now, and it's really coming together. So we plan to shoot it this year.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
As I talk to you, I'm trying to think, okay, so what was Dean like being a little kid? But I automatically thought when you were talking about how you formulate these stories, if you would have asked me, who's unrelated to film, I mean, I couldn't
Mhm.
do a film right now if you paid me to. It's just not in my wheelhouse. If you had asked me, try to come up with a concept of something that you were always curious about as a kid. I
Yeah.
would tell you that the movie I would make, I mean, it sounds really crazy, but as a little
Yeah.
kid, my sister and I used to talk about this all the time. We had this favorite department store in Yonkers, and it was
Yeah.
called John Wanamaker's. And we used to like pretend that we would like think we could get locked inside.
Yeah.
And once they locked the kids inside, we could go to any department we want. We could
Oh,
try on any
sure.
clothes we wanted. We could play
Yeah.
with any toys we wanted. Like it was like we could just have
Yeah.
24
Of course.
hours, locked unsupervised in this,
In a
department
department
store.
store. Of course.
And it's funny though, because now if you asked it a kid nowadays, probably the same age, like a 10-year-old, what would you want to make a movie about? Or what would you think would be
Mm.
like a dream come true? They probably wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
So, it's like I'm
Yeah.
dating myself like maybe 40 years ago. That's what I thought would be the most incredible thing. So, when you were 10, were you
Hmm.
thinking in alignment of storytelling? Because we used to like pretend. We used to be like, oh,
Yeah.
we have Barbie dolls, or we have like, we're going to be married to Starsky and Hutch. Like, we used to come up with these like kind of stories to play. So,
Of
did
course.
you have
Of course.
any of that?
So I have a fairly different childhood relationship with film and with theater. Is that my father was a professional actor. He also was an artistic director at a local professional theater in the town we grew up in Santa Paula, California. And so I grew up at a very young age playing in the seats and with the costumes of all the people that were on the theater, in the stage, and looking at the makeup and being fascinated by the makeup and stage work. And it was something that, in that environment, I was like, oh, of course, this is what adults do. This is, they make believe and they go on stage and tell stories and have great respect for writing. And then, of course, he did a lot of television and films. So again, just growing up with this idea that it is a real thing and something that people can do, and there is like a craft behind it. So I had kind of an in. And my father, from a very early age, he lost his sight when I was 7 years old. So I would read to him a lot. And so he would have me read plays, he would have me read Shakespeare. And he was such a well-read person and a bibliophile. And he kind of, certainly that leached into my personality and who I am. So I think, for me, have my father having such respect for writers, it was very much part of my like, well, okay, that's what you're going to do. You're going to sit, you're going to tell stories, you're going to write. It wasn't as easy for me because I'm also dyslexic, so the idea of actually writing was kind of horrifying. But telling stories, wanting to tell stories, even if I had to kind of read them out loud and my mom would write them down, when I was a kid, I was always telling some weird story, some sci-fi thing, some fantasy, some horror. So it was always just something I've really wanted to do. And film, of course, I've been always such a huge cinephile, and and love movies. And so that's where I was when I was 10. I was doing that, and I was, I love nature as well. So I was playing outside a lot. I grew up riding horses. I love doing that. It's been a while though. So I caught the bug early. Let's just say that.
I find that so interesting. You speak about your dad in his TV and film
hmm
acting days. What kind of characters was he selected to play? Was he like the villain or was he more of a love interest?
He was a big guy. He's big. I'm a big guy. He was a big guy. He played a lot of sheriffs. He played a lot of people in power. When he was working, he was a character actor in kind of the classic 70s television. So he'd pop up. One time I was watching like The Incredible Hulk on a rerun, and I had no idea, and then my dad shows up as like the nasty sweaty sheriff of the town. So um
That's awesome. Wow.
but yeah, he had a lot of parts like that. But in his theater world, there was a lot of variance in the plays that they would select and do. So I would see a production of Major Barbara or Waiting for Godot, and it was all just a kind of, at the time I look at it, it just all seems so normal, but it really was a really fun, fascinating way to grow up.
I really appreciate that. It's very interesting to me because when you say like your father had a vision problem, my dad had a vision problem. My dad
Hmm.
had to end his work at the Reader's Digest magazine because
Yeah,
he had early onset of macular degeneration. So
yeah,
he was
sure.
around 56 or 57, took an early retirement and didn't drive anymore. So
Yeah.
my dad had been like a race car driver in the 50s. And
Wow.
now he was asking, his daughter of 18 or 19 years old, can you drive me around? But it was also his kind of incredible detail. Just like you said with your dad, like my dad had worked for the Reader's Digest magazine. He was
hmm
not college educated, but he
Yeah.
made it a point to go to the word find and study the difficult words, like
Oh
which
gosh,
one of
yeah.
these words is the
We had a
definition that
we
we're
had a
showing you.
dictionary by the dining room table where we were constantly flipping through the dictionary.
Yeah,
hmm
I find that really interesting. But I also, what I really like about your story is that being in that environment that you actually like followed suit. Some people are in a family, for instance, like they grow up in a family of police or grow up in a family of firemen, and
Yeah,
they say, that's the last job I want to do. Like they
yeah.
watch the family members go through something and they're like, I don't want to do it. But I find it interesting that you thought that you were going to follow also. Did you go to particular acting school? Did you go to like Juilliard? Like, what was your training?
No, Max went to Juilliard, the Juilliard crowd. No, I actually never finished college. I had because of the education system in the 90s, and I was dyslexic. I actually really hated school, and so my people tended to be the theater people, and it was kind of, and even now, you live your life. I'm in Princeton. My wife teaches at a school here. And when I go into the city and I meet with Max and I meet with like a DP, it's still like this incredible, like, oh yeah, this is of the group. This is who we are. We're the crazy people that are trying to make movies together. And so I grew up, however, that bled into my system. But yeah, so when I was young, much like my father, I really focused on trying to be an actor. And I had some various degrees of things that kind of were working out for me. And so I ended up moving to New York. And that's actually where I met Max. We worked at a video store together in Chelsea called Allen's Alley Video. And that was back in the days where I would watch like 6 movies a night. It was crazy time. So, but great learning experience. And yeah, you just kind of go. There was a time period where I kind of gave up a little bit on the idea of making some films, and I was working in South Pasadena at a library there, and all I did was read, and I would just read as much as I could. And I kind of went a different path where I started writing a lot of prose and short stories and kind of focusing more creatively in that world. And again, it kind of came back. I'm a very visual person as well, so I love photography, I love film, I love lighting a room. So again, just putting those elements together was something I personally always feel like, oh well, this is what I'm supposed to do. It just took a long time to actually get there. It took a little longer than I'd hoped, but that's what happens, you know.
I want to touch on something that you talked about earlier because you said that a lot of your early days of making these shorts, you were using an iPhone.
Hmm.
So I'm not an iPhone person.
Yeah,
I could barely make a video of myself to do on TikTok or something,
yeah.
you know? So I'm not very, like, knowledgeable of these things. How difficult would it be for you to film that? So were you carrying the phone with you? Were you like
So
strapping it to your head? Were you like
the original short film, I had my coworker and very good friend Stefan Zimkin. He was the cameraman. I had done a lot of tests on how to shoot it, and there's certain apps you can get for your phone that kind of give it more cinematic qualities. And this was I think it was the iPhone 7. So it was the first iPhone that had 4K, that it was shooting in 4K resolution. And so, yeah, we went out and just kind of captured all of these things. And it was a great learning experience. It was a little silly. People thought we were crazy, you know. There was also, I did have a gimbal that I was kind of using as well, to hold the camera on myself if I needed to have that kind of selfie type look. But I mean, it was more about, I mean, would I shoot on an iPhone again? Probably not, but it was more a liberation to kind of say, okay, well, here's this tool that I do have. Let's see what we can actually do with it in a creative way.
what are the limitations of that? Because like you had to film, then stop, then save, then pick it up and do it again. Like, how long were you able to record?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that what we did is I on the gimbal that we had, my Stefan had an extra battery pack because it would actually lose power because you're filming for a long time. The battery would go down, and so we had an extra battery pack on the gimbal that it was on, and I remember being able to film quite a bit, so we were able to do it. However, also it was very hot, so it really was film it. Did we get it? Okay, let's move on, and we did it for like 3 days, so not a lot of time. But yeah, I mean, there are obvious limitations to the technology. It's going to have, it was one of the reasons why there's not very little dialogue in the actual short, because I knew that recording dialogue was going to be really hard. And a lot of the dialogue, even though there's little moments of it, that was all later. I recorded it again. I did ADR over it. So
Yeah, that's interesting. Tell me about getting into these film festivals. Like, have you been invited? Did you have to apply? What are they actually like?
film festivals are incredible. They like, you need them for an indie film. They're the best things that can happen. It's also this, as a filmmaker, it's just in kind of really kind of hard journey to navigate what are kind of legit festivals or what are some kind of internet festivals that you maybe are just taking your money. You don't really know. I've now learned so much about the process of applying to film festivals. We were lucky in that early on we actually got a sales agent. So Justina, she also helped get us into a few festivals. There's really two routes. You either have a sales agent and they will reach out to the festival heads and say, "Oh, I have this film. Would you be willing to take a look at it?" Or you do have to apply yourself. And for example, something like the Salem Horror Fest, I actually just applied myself, and we ended up getting in, and that was like a dream. It was such a great venue, and yeah, it was great to be up there. All the festivals that I've gone to, Horror Hound, you just meet so many wonderful filmmakers, and it led to incredible things. Going to that festival, then I had an interview in Horror Hound magazine, and then Jay, who helps run that festival, has always been so supportive, and it was just like a great environment.
Yes,
And
well,
important because that's really what gets the film shown, and gets those first bit of buzz going that is so important to kind of leading to the actual release of it.
Yes. Well, this past Salem, I was recently there in October doing my psychic paranormal thing, and we were kind of sitting in the same space as Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
Yeah.
which was a horror festival in itself. So it's interesting when you really see people attend. Like, I also was affiliated last year with I Heart Horror, which is in the New Jersey area.
Yeah.
And there's really true fans. Like, I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, oh, it may not be good weather. I think I Heart Horror was like in February, and I was like, I don't think anyone's gonna come. And then like 2 hours into it, it's like there's 100 people here. It's like, where'd they come from? It's like
Yeah.
they're true blue fans, and they
Yeah, they are.
literally, when you're standing there, you can overhear a conversation, and they're like, really in this deep conversation. And then you realize they're talking about a scene in a movie. Like they're
Yeah. Yeah.
debating the scene on their take on it. So it's kind of interesting. I just this afternoon, one of my heavy metal friends called me up and he said, have you seen this? And I said, what is it? And he said what it was. I said, I can't even pronounce that. And he said, you
Yeah.
got to see it. And I said, well, tell me what it is, because I'm not just going to see something. He and I have been friends for like 30 years. Rob Caggiano, he was in Anthrax and Volbeat and all this. So we're like the horror freaks. So he's the one that told me to watch The Ring years ago and like
Oh
all
sure.
these like
Yeah.
things. So he said the name of it again. And I said, what are you talking about? I can't even pronounce that. And he said, this is the original movie. It
Uh,
came out in 1929 or something. And he said they just made a remake of it. It's like the original
oh,
vampire.
Nosferatu. Yeah,
Yeah.
Nosferatu. Yeah, of
And he
course,
was
yeah.
going on and on and on about it. And I said, first of all, I can't pronounce it. And he was like, you just have to watch it. So, do you understand why he was so excited about that? Like, do you have
Oh,
any
I
like
mean,
take on
FW,
that?
it's a Murnau film. It's got such a wonderful history of, they wanted to make a version of Dracula, but they couldn't get the rights to it, and so they made their own version of it, and so Dracula becomes like Count Orlok, and it's but it's really dark, and there's a lot of, you know, references to the plague, and it's a great classic piece of silent era cinema that I would definitely recommend. Absolutely.
Okay, so that's two people in the same day. So I'm just
Yes.
I'm
Watch
definitely gonna
Nosferatu.
watch it. But it's interesting because when I speak with a lot of people that follow horror,
Hmm.
their interests are also very similar in other things. So I'm gonna quiz you. Do you have like a fascination with Sherlock Holmes?
Sherlock Holmes. I love deductive reasoning, and I love I the I can't remember. I read a couple of them long time ago. Hard to say if I have a fascination, but I love the character.
So part of this has been a conversation of mine for a long time because I somehow always find Sherlock Holmes fans. I don't know why, but it just somehow
Yeah,
pops up in conversation. I'm not one, but
yeah,
when I ask them further, they all tend to be horror fans. And I'm like, I don't see the correlation, but their way of the correlation is the mystery, trying to
yeah. Sure.
solve, trying to collect the clues, trying to find the mystery. That's the correlation that they see. So I was
Yeah.
like, well, I was thinking, I was like, I have to ask Dean this
You
because,
know, it's funny, like because I love horror, and I do, and ever since I was a kid, I mean, I had horror posters up on the wall, and my fascination with it, I mean, if I'm being honest, it actually came through like, and this was because my father was working in theater. I love the horror makeup, I love the idea of like all the gory makeup and like what the process was to make that happen and look realistic. And so I would kind of do gashes on my face, and I would try to do, when I was young, and I would put pins in my head. And I mean, even to this day, I'm sure there's a bottle of fake blood around here somewhere. It's just, it's a weird thing to get into, but that led to, again, it's that whole idea of that the filmmaking process is it's a magic trick. It's all fake, and you're kind of trying to make it look real, and that was a huge thing for me. But in terms of, like mystery, I've always kind of looked at, especially with my own work, kind of, there is a great mystery, I guess, in Brightwood, but I don't necessarily answer it. And what I wanted to focus on was more the relationship, with more was the people and the emotional impact of what that being in a situation like that meant. And to me, that adds different elements of horror, to it. For example, I kind of always said that even though it's physically impossible to be stuck in a time loop, we all seem to know what that feels like, because in our own way we are stuck in time. And of course, we know what it feels like to be in a bad relationship and feel stuck, or to be trapped and feeling like you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. So there, for me, kind of was like the real horror, and kind of looking into that and how that would kind of manifest itself with these two characters in an actual real scenario, absurd scenario. And so yes, I've always loved a good mystery, but it's also very much about the emotions and the people, and how they're traversing this environment.
It's so true, though. I think what you touched on, what you just said, is
Mhm.
really based on the characters because the horror is around the
Yeah.
situation. And I think that's very much true when my mind goes back to my favorite 1980s. And I'm seeing the movie in my head like Carrie. I'm seeing the
Yeah.
movie in my head like Blowout. Like there was a
Yeah.
lot of movies in the 80s that were very much situational. You had main characters that the whole movie you're just kind of following these characters, not really knowing that they're going to be in this tragic event or not really knowing how the situation's going to fall apart. So you're just kind of blindly following these characters. And that's exactly what you did in Brightwood because when I started to watch the movie, like I just like typed in Brightwood, and then there's a lot of art, like people wrote about it, and they're like, "Oh, you have to watch the clues." I'm like, I'm not writing, I'm not reading any comments. I
Yeah.
don't want to know anybody's idea. I want to go into this blindly, and that's why I always think, because back in the '80s, I mean, I'm probably older than you, but back in the '80s, we used to have two movie reviewers, and it was called Siskel and Ebert,
Of
and
course.
yeah, they would sit
I've
there.
heard a lot.
Right? I was amazing. They used to sit there and they used to review the movie, and one guy would do thumbs up, one guy would do thumbs down, or they would do both thumbs up. And I remember so many times my dad would be like, "Why don't you watch Siskel and Ebert before you go to the movie?" I'm like, "No, Matt Dillon's in
Yeah,
it. I
give
don't
it
care
away.
what they think,
And
like."
I'm the same way. I don't do any reviews or anything before. I'll watch a movie and then of course look at some stuff after. But it was such a fascinating it was such a fascinating time. You never know how these things will go, but yeah, so many people wrote about the movie, and they'd had, essays about what was going on. And, as the kind of person behind a lot of that, it's fun to have this piece of work that you've worked on, and you've done it for your own, reasons. You were in your own headspace and your own emotional space while you were making it, and then you kind of let it go into the world, and then it becomes its own thing, and people have their own theories about it, and I love it. I think it's great.
Well, I love it too because
They're
it's
all right. They're all.
well, it's true. I have a question because after I watched it, I reached out to Joey and I was like, "Joey, this is
Oh yeah,
like
Joey's
amazing,
so nice. Such a nice
Yeah.
guy.
And I was just like, "This is amazing," and then I wrote down like three things that really bothered me, and I kept looking
Mhm.
at the three things, and then I just said, "No, I'm not going to ask Dane about this. I'm going to ask him a question that probably nobody has asked him." And now you have the chance to say if someone has asked you this.
Okay.
But in watching Brightwood, when I was done with it, 24 hours later, in my head, I saw a second movie and that same couple is shown to you again, but they're older. And they're in a different scenario. They're not going around a lake, but they're in a different scenario. And
Mm.
you get to pick up where they left off. But all the clues that were in the movie, they reappear. So the
Yeah.
couple is now older. Okay. So if I was writing it like in my head,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I have them in a memory care unit. It's like Alzheimer's. So
Yeah. Of
they're
course.
they're
Yeah.
actually reliving going around the lake,
Over and over
but they're
again.
actually walking around the memory care unit,
Yeah.
and they still dealing with a lot of the same issues that they were
Yeah.
going through, because it's all based on the reality of the relationship, their personal struggle, and then being a struggle.
Sure.
So I was just like, oh my God, this could
I
be
mean, that's
like
fascinating. That's a fascinating idea. And I think about, I've had a lot of time to kind of think about, the idea of time and going around in loops and memory and our brain's interpretation of time and how these moments that we live. One thing like I've been with my wife for, you know, God, 18 or 19 years now. And you are in, when you've been with someone for so long, of course you have time when you're like you hate each other, and then a little time goes on and you love each other again, and then you kind of have these ebbs and flows. And one thing that you start to realize is that I'm so different from the person that I was 10 years ago. We both are such different people. However, we were those people, and we have memories of those people. But it's that kind of idea that, as you kind of progress through this journey, you fundamentally like do how you become different, as you grow, I guess. But yes, the idea of memory and what those moments and situations that we have in our head will be when we're older, and what we'll hold on to and what we'll lose. It's all fascinating and sometimes tragic. But that's a wonderful idea.
the piece of it that I like is because I've actually worked with a lot of people that have gone through
Hmm.
Alzheimer's, dementia, and all that. And they literally, I mean, I watched a woman. She used to be a singer, and she just, a song came on and she went right into singing
M-
it. But
Music. Too.
yeah, but all these other things, like from 5 minutes to 10 minutes later, you know, asking questions just doesn't have it. So it's kind of interesting how, and that population, they could go back in time. I mean, crystal
Yeah.
clear on things, but
Yeah.
the short term memory is not there. So that's why when I was thinking of Brightwood, I was like, wow, that couple, they could have been, I don't know, 40. So
Yeah.
if they're in a memory care unit, that's 30 years ago.
Yeah. Of
So
course.
they would
Yeah.
have the recall of the whatever. So it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting.
It's a
Yeah.
great idea. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I thought it was
fascinating.
so interesting. But there's so many things. I often think of things that I thought of when I was younger. I wrote two books, but the two books I wrote about were very much real life. I wrote about being a psychic medium, I wrote about my coffee readings and about helping people, through grief. But when I was little, I had a teddy bear, and I had like bad earaches, and I had all these things that kids go through.
Yeah.
And my dad used to kind of incorporate, my dolls. Like I had a teddy and I had a mousy and I had, and I was very little, but he always incorporated them as if they were part of the family. We have to say
Oh,
goodnight to them and
yeah.
everything.
Sure.
And the piece of it that I always thought of was, in my magic world, they could come alive.
Of
So
course.
they wouldn't just be the teddy bear. The teddy bear could get up and do things and whatever, which I think is always fascinating. I think interviewing children on their concepts, a lot of people just say, oh, well, there's Disney, right? And
Yeah.
Disney puts out movies for kids. Like Disney was made by adults, right? So
Sure.
where are the movies that kids want to be made? Where are they?
Yeah. I mean, the imagination is just so. I mean, I have an 8-year-old and my daughter, and their developing minds are just so fascinating, and the imagination and what can come up and how they put things together, and they're kind of constantly in the state of observing and learning. And I've always tried to kind of hold on to as much of that as I suppose I can. And I think being when I was a child, I would do that too. I had action figures and I had, stuffed animals as well, and they all had their story. I would set up whole stories of like them, and there was a very imaginative, world. And I feel like in some extent, I'm doing the same thing. It's just the stakes are a little bit higher because you grow and you kind of get a better sense of life. So,
It's so true. When you look at things like Superman and a lot of those, classic movies of like, Lois Lane and all this,
yeah,
they were dealing with real situations. They weren't
yeah,
just rescuing people. They had situations that were happening. I mean, he had a
yeah.
day job, right?
Sure.
He
Yeah,
had a
of course.
day job. He was supposed to be a regular guy, Clark Kent, right? So I think the concept of that, I think the world right now, we're going through tough times.
Yeah,
And I think, New York City, I mean, I could speak for New York City. We haven't seen New York City like this since the 70s.
yeah.
There's kind of like a lot of action on the train right now. There's a lot of action on the streets right now. There's a lot of action happening. And I think the idea of having, a Clark Kent and, somebody that could just, rip off their suit jacket, he was coming to save us, sounds really good.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of that happening, so we were the heroes among us. So that's why I think the movies are a great escape. And I think movie makers like yourself take really big issues, just like Brightwood, a couple that, really loves each other, but, may not be able to stand each other. But also your upcoming film. I mean, being trapped in a car,
Yeah,
having situations.
I've always kind of loved the idea. I don't want to give too much away plot wise or anything, but I've always kind of loved the idea of having these kind of high-minded situations. So you have like a time loop movie, but instead of putting, the big hero in the middle of it, like what is this real couple? We'll put them in the middle of that situation. And the next film, Drive by Night, is very similar. It's the, you can imagine a version of this film where it would be, Tom Cruise, but instead of Tom Cruise, like let's put a real person, and then how did they get through these situations? And I think a lot of people can really relate to that, you know. I think we do need the heroes, and I think the heroes exist in the world. But at the same time, I think we also need to see ourselves dealing with kind of profound situations as well, and being able to how would we feel in that situation, and to be able to reflect about ourselves in those in that world.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's really interesting. I have to say that going forward, you have this plan to do your next film. What does the rest of your year look like? When do you plan on doing that film, or
Oh,
how do you looking at your year?
I mean, my year is gonna be very busy. I mean, Max is an incredible producer. We work together really well. I mean, right now we're in the kind of pre-production phase where we're I'm drawing out storyboards. We're looking at locations. We hired a DP, and we're kind of pressing on. We're going to be looking at casting, but this year is going to be filled with just it has to become, an obsession almost because the project is so grand, and the idea of doing it is it's like this Herculean effort to kind of make a movie and get these people together and get it all going. So I can't. I mean, it's sometimes it really does feel like it's insane, but I also love it. I love being in the middle of it and moving people forward, and I know Max does too. So it's that idea of just telling a story and telling good stories and bringing people together. And my hope is that this second film, the first film, Brightwood, we kind of didn't really know. I mean, we knew what we were doing theoretically, but it was the first time actually doing it, and there was a lot of, fear and kind of just get through it and try to see, what we can do. And we planned and planned and planned, and we're going to plan and plan and plan for this one. But I feel like we're also, the learning curve is just extraordinary. So now we're going into this film, which is a completely different, mentality of how we can actually practically get things done, and it's been very fun so far.
Do you have all the actors set up?
Not yet. We have stuff out to talent, but we're kind of still early enough that we're going to be hearing back soon.
And
But the production will last. Just from my side of it, when you do a movie and it goes into production, pre-production, and then production, and then it'll be post-production, I'll be living with this thing for the next year or more, maybe two, you know.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that long. Wow.
Yeah. Takes a
Wow,
long
it's
time.
exciting. And did you pick out your locations? Do you know where this is going to
We're
happen?
we're currently looking at a number of locations. We've gone through the New Jersey Film Commission. We've gone to the Hudson River Valley Film Commission. We're kind of looking at all of these different places. Everyone has been extraordinarily helpful. We haven't really decided. Some of it takes place in Manhattan, so we have some locations there, but all kind of still in the process, which is a early stage where you kind of just take a lot of photographs. You talk about logistically, what does this mean in terms of kind of like how we could utilize a number of locations closer to each other, so we don't have to move a whole crew to all these different places. It's a big process making a film. Lots of organizing and planning and scheduling and all of that.
They do a lot of filming here in Yonkers. We have
Yeah.
Lion Gate. They're actually building a second location for Lion Gate. That's
Oh,
how big
really?
it's getting. Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
cool.
And they do a lot of filming in Yonkers. So if you're interested in Yonkers, I
Yeah.
could be your tour
I
guide.
mean, we gotta go. I mean, Max and I basically we have a plan, but a part of that plan is also we just get in a car and drive around, and we got to figure out what we're doing and see the locations. But to give you an example in terms of Joey, who was so great, I had edited the whole film, and I laid a good chunk of sound design on it, which was kind of temporary sound design. But he didn't come on board probably until a year after we had filmed it. So, I mean, it just took that long to even get to a place where we were, now in sound. I think this next film will go faster, but, now dealing with sound. And then he came on board and really gave a wonderful, mix and brought in a lot of atmosphere and was great to work with. And again, it was kind of all still during COVID, so we were on Zoom a lot of the time. But he was just such a nice man and so wonderful to work with.
Yeah, Joey's great. He did all the spooky sounds.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Well, it has been a pleasure to have you on. I can't tell you how
Grateful.
excited I am to talk about Brightwood, to talk about all of your upcoming endeavors, and I look forward to meeting you in person and getting together with Max. So, anything you want to plug, social media, LinkedIn, anything you want, so people can contact you?
I'm Dane Elcar on Instagram. I generally just put some photos up. I'm not a huge social media user, but I guess, yeah, if you want to follow me, Instagram is probably the best place right now. And yeah, keep an eye out. A lot of really exciting things happening.
Very cool. Well, it has been a pleasure to have you on, Dane. And we're going to roll out with your favorite song, Changes by David Bowie.
Awesome.
Thank you again.
Still don't know what I was waiting for, and my time was running wild, a million dead-end streets, and every time I thought I'd got it made, it seemed the taste was not so sweet. So I turned myself to face me, but I've never caught a glimpse of how the others must see the faker. I'm much too fast to take that test. Changes. Turn and face the strain. Changes. Don't wanna be a richer man. Changes. Turn and face the strain. Changes. It's gonna have to be a different man. sides, but never leave the stream of warm and permanent sand. So the days float through my eyes, but still the days seem the same. And these children that you spit on as they try to change their worlds are immune to your consultations. They're quite aware of what they're going through. Changes. Turn and face the strange. Changes. Don't tell them to grow up out of it. Changes. Turn and face the strange. Changes. Where's your shame? You've left us up to our next event. Time may change me. You can't twist time. Strange fascination fascinating me. Our changes are taking the pace I'm going through. Changes. Turn and face the strange. Changes. Ooh, look out, you rock and rollers. Changes. Turn and face the strange. Changes. Pretty soon now you're gonna get older. Time may change me, but I can't trace time. I said that time may change me, but I can't trace time. Oh yeah. Still don't know what I was waiting for, and my time was running wild, a million dead-end streets, and every time I thought I'd got it made, it seemed the taste was not so sweet. So I turned myself to face me, but I've never caught a glimpse of how the others must see the faker. I'm much too fast to take that test. Changes. Turn and face the strange. Changes. Don't wanna be a richer man. Changes. Turn and face the strange. Changes. It's gonna have to be a different man. Time may change me, but I can't trace time. Yeah. I watch the ripples change the size, but never leave the stream of warm and permanent sand. So the days float through my eyes, but still the days seem the same. And these children that you spit on as they try to change their worlds are immune to your consultations. They're quite aware of what they're going through. Changes. Turn and face the strange. Changes. Don't tell them to grow up out of it.